RRTPO to order. Even though we are still one short of a physical quorum, I feel like we can at least begin, discussion as needed or as wanted of some of these items that are coming up on the full board here at 9:30. 9:30? Is it really 9:30? All right. So we're bound to get a quorum member here shortly. But with that, what I'd like to do, if we can, is just where is the Secretary of TPO? I want to go down, if I can reorder and have cooperation on that. I just want to reorder the agenda for the executive committee and just talk about number 5, which is review of selected RRTPO agenda topics. And I know from talking with Mr. Hodges and others that the changes, another round of changes to Smart Scale is of great concern to, I think, every jurisdiction in the TPO, though I have not polled them all. But I do think this is worthy of our time to open up a discussion. The most significant change potentially is, of course, the cutting in half of applications that we're allowed to submit as a locality. And I think that means that for larger suburban localities like Hanover, Henrico, Richmond, I think we'd be at 5, if I'm not mistaken, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. And then the smaller jurisdictions are now down to 2. And I just open it up by stating that, of course, I've been here long enough to have seen all of this, as many of you have in this room, from its inception. We didn't have an application limit when this all began. There was no application limit. And we have now seen several revisions to a place now where they would like us to get to 5. And I'll just start it out there. 5 total per round. Now this is a 2-year round, right? 2 years. It's a 2-year round on each of these. So I'll just open it up if anybody has comments, but let's start there if we can.
Sure. So if I can jump in, Mr. Chair.
Please do, Mr. Bushing. I'm sorry. I didn't. That was a long.
The tier limit's actually been revised slightly. So the proposal was originally 5 and 2, and based on some of the feedback that's been heard from the localities and from the MPOs around the state, the new proposal is slightly higher at 6 for the largest jurisdictions. There's a new 3rd category for mid-size, which would only cover Hanover in our region, but it would be 4 applications, so continuing at 4, and then 3 for the smallest localities. So it's slightly more, but still a reduction from where we are currently.
And can you go over the basis that they are claiming for this change again?
Sure. So I think the foundation or the main issue is it takes a lot of time for staff on both the locality side and on the VDOT side to evaluate all of these projects. And when the projects are actually submitted at the time of the application deadline in August, most of them aren't actually ready to be evaluated at that point. So there's still a lot of work that goes on for the next usually like 3 or 4 months of coordination between VDOT, DRPT, and the staff at the locality to get those applications actually ready and finalized for scoring. And so the approach that OIPA has taken is proposing to cut the number of applications with the expectation that that would improve application quality, along with some other changes in the readiness review. And based on that reduction, then they would expect that we'd have more applications that are in a better state and be able to move forward. So the intent is to cut down on staff time on both ends. But obviously the impact would be reducing the number of projects that you could submit for funding.
I have a question about that, what you just said. I'm sorry, please, Ms. O'Bannon.
Well, it's pretty obvious, but we have discussed this many times. Do we put in things that we know are less expensive, knowing that they'll all get done? Or do we put in one big project and just push that and not worry about the number because we know it's super expensive? We've always had that question. I mean, it's the classic annual question for every type of, we always do the same thing. The biggest change we did was like 20 years ago, where we actually started agreeing on stuff. I'm just gonna say that. But now that we have this process, it's, everything they did with Smart Scale was to shift the amount of money. So is that what we should look for, or is it a big one big project, 6 little projects? What gets paid? That's what we've always discussed, just, okay.
Does the 6 projects, can I follow up on that?
Good morning, please
Does
do.
the 6 projects include Fairfax as well as Chesterfield?
Yes, it does.
Oh, great.
Now, well, when I look at that,
I know.
I'm very seriously, I mean, some of this stuff, that very easily a 7th project in Chesterfield may be a whole lot more important to the Commonwealth than a 1st or 3rd place project in Floyd, which is going to be that, but yet it can't even be put in.
And he's not here to defend this, by the
No,
way.
I'm not saying that.
I'm not putting it in.
This conversation.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
No, it could result in the number of projects that, good projects, never being even seen.
6 is an arbitrary number.
They all are.
Yep.
I mean, we went down from unlimited to, what was the first cut down to? 20? What was the first cut?
I think it went from unlimited to 10.
Correct. So it went unlimited to 10. It was that big of a jump?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember being annoyed about that. All right, unlimited to 10, and now we want to go 10 to 6. So what is, here's my question. What is the link between the reduction in applications received and the quality of the application? What is, because I'm not certain that one leads to the other. It seems like maybe there's something missing in that sandwich.
So I think the intent or the thought behind it is that by reducing the number that we have to work on, you're reducing the staff time needed so you can improve the quality of the fewer number of applications that you'll be submitting. So I think that's the thought behind the process is really focusing on staff time, because it is intensive, getting all the studies ready, getting all the estimates prepared, getting the sketches. There's a lot of work that goes into a smart scale application.
Well, and that work to get a application in a state of readiness has increased over time. Like the requirements for a ready application have also increased, right? So on the one hand, we've increased the requirements, but we're saying that even though I say we, this is the royal we've increased the requirements for these applications to be in a state of readiness. But so in order to have more applications in a state of readiness, we're going to cut down the number. Why not cut the regulation that has been, imposed on everyone to have an application in a state of readiness? That seemed to be more of a direct way to approach that issue, right?
So
Maybe I'm missing something here.
I think the intent is similar to the issues that we've been running to at the TPO level of knowing enough about a project to have a good estimate up front and being able to deliver it on time and on budget. So the goal, obviously, from the Smart Scale program is the same. And so the more information that we can get up front, the more likely we'll be able to do that. So another component of these changes is actually requiring everything to be finished during that application window. So rather than giving us the extra period afterward to do the work, it's making sure all those readiness requirements, and the smart portal will actually tell localities, I guess the proposed changes would tell you what you actually need to be able, like if you say you're having this feature on this project, what document needs to be submitted on the deadline date and what needs to be finalized and who needs to have signed off on it. So they're trying to help streamline some of that process as well to support it. But yes, I mean, there is something of a disconnect of this is very early in the funding process and we're asking for a lot of detail.
Having done this a few times, when the county offers to pay for part of it, it'll go through a lot better and it often gets that's the fund, you know, matching, not totally, but we're offering 7 million of a $20 million project, and it gets done. The other thing is, if we combine this with the CBTA money, we could say, you know, we're gonna, and that means if a county has a project, but the county can't come up with all the money, it could be on the CBTA list, and if the CBTA votes to fund part of it, would that push it over the top and get it done? I mean, this is general. Won't that help? That's the only way we, in Henrico, the only way we've ever gotten the projects done is to offer to pay part of it. Or half of it, but usually a third, let's say. Okay?
I guess our real question here, though, is not how to get it approved, but to be able to even submit it.
See, that's really the hard
When we're
part.
sitting there, are we trying to approve, I mean, increase the staff time at what level? At the level above us, or on our level, or to local level?
Well, I mean, based on what, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bushing, but if they're gonna require the package to be completely ready prior to submission, that puts the onus on the locality and locality staff to have pre-done all of this work and have it ready for submission, that you can't submit a half-baked or three-quarters baked cake and expect to kind of piecemeal the rest of it together over the next couple of months like we've been doing. Is that right?
That is correct. I think the change is really VDOT has and DRPT have been supporting to get those projects to the finish line. So it's really more of a question of moving the timing of when that's going to happen. So, you know, if the district has been supporting us to get something done after it was submitted, what we'd be doing is between the pre-app and the application, there would be a lot of focus, and hopefully even before pre-apps, we'd have more coordination with the districts to get the projects ready. So it's really shifting the timeline of your coordination with the VDOT and DRPT offices to before the application instead of after you've already picked your project and submitted it.
Well, what about, and I'm forgive me, I don't know the name of the term, I'm not sure if I can remember it, but you have to get basically a stamp of approval on these projects, and there's a window of time that's good for. What is that called? Do you know what that is?
I'm assuming it's one of the reports.
What is that, Barbara?
Well, with NEPA documents, they do have shelf life.
These shelf lives, right? So if you have a shelf life on some of the components, right? And we are somehow missing the window of being able to get that approval in on a reinstatement of a project that's probably the same exact project we've submitted 6 times for funding, but has been denied. We just missed that window. We just missed that cycle now of a 2-year application.
So I think, again, that goes back to the coordination before the applications would be submitted. And a lot of times if it's just re-upping the approval and renewing something, it's a lot easier because you're not starting from the ground. So like for NEPA, for example, if we already have an approved environmental impact and that whole assessment's already been done, it's a much easier lift for them to just take a look and refresh it and update it after a few years when it's expired, rather than starting from scratch and redoing the entire analysis. So it just pushes, again, back that coordination. You have to be aware of those expiring deadlines and coordinate on the front end. So it does create challenges. I mean, it does create a new set of challenges for applicants.
So what do smaller localities do in this situation where they really don't have the staff and time and resources to commit to this new way of doing business? Do they lean on a TPO here? Do we?
Our consultants,
I mean, you hire it out, basically, you hire it out. And
depends on the project, but yes, I mean.
I don't know how this helps anybody. Maybe I'm.
It's all part of the trying to not give you money. That's what I have learned. Is there any list of the projects that get accepted each year? Can we look at the past projects that were accepted and done? So that maybe we can have an idea of which ones we should actually even put in there that might get done? Even though I'm sure there's some that each jurisdiction thinks are, number one, it will take 6 or 8 or 10 years to even get them to look at it. I mean, is there, what can we learn from the past history?
Yes, so we do get the list and the scores for each round. I think the challenge is it's all normalized within that round, so you can't really translate from one round to the next on how a project's going to score. The other thing is with the other proposed changes, so there are many other proposed changes beyond the application limit. Like congestion is moving from looking at congestion today to congestion 10 years in the future. There's a land use factor that's been part of Smart Scale that would no longer be an independent factor. All of its weight would be added to other factors, and then it becomes a multiplier to the overall score for those 5 factors. So there's other changes that make it really difficult to go from one round to the next to say how a project's going to score.
Have we had any rounds of Smart Scale where there haven't been changes? We've had continual moving of the goalposts throughout this process, is that right? So let me ask a question. If, let's just say, for example, you're in Northern Virginia and you're used to getting the lion's share of transportation dollars, wouldn't the continual moving of goalposts over time benefit your region as opposed to other regions in the state? That is to say, if we now impose, since we had an unlimited application, then we're down to 10, doesn't that kind of damper our region? And then from 10 now to just 6, okay, well, they threw us a bone at 6, thanks so much.
No, they didn't.
Doesn't
They
that
balanced
place,
it out with us.
doesn't that put the lid on the pot of Richmond over time as we continue to move these goalposts and push an emerging region like Richmond into a place where we're never going to get the funding that we need, but they will continue to be in the driver's seat on these projects?
So I think looking at the last round of Smart Scale is probably a good example. There were no statewide, the high priority program. So the Smart Scale is really 2 pots. There's the district grant, which is just in our area, and then there's the high priority pot, which is statewide. And Northern Virginia didn't get any money through that last round. So that actually was mostly on the I-64 widening project. So it actually went to us in Hampton Roads instead.
Well, it went to the federal highway, but
Right.
anyway,
But
that's another.
the idea, I think, is that on the statewide competition, it does really become a statewide competitive process. And part of what's being proposed this time around is actually getting rid of this step where some of that statewide money stays within a district. So it actually becomes a full-fledged statewide competition, which would benefit, our assessment is it would benefit the large urban areas like us relative to other portions of the state, because we do have so many more needs for congestion and other factors that just don't play out the same across the rest of the state.
We're not gonna get any money for the next year or two, I can practically guarantee that, because we got it and they took it. But let me put it this way. Who specifically does the decisions for Smart Scale? Because let me put it this way. I was having dinner at a, VACO event, and at that event, it was an evening event, and 2 women were sitting around near where I was from Fairfax. And there was a guy sitting next to me. I didn't know who he was. They were just talking to him really nice, doing all that schmoozing. And he said, "Don't worry, Penny, you'll get your money for," and he named the road. He said, "'Cause I drive that every day." And I found out he was one of the guys that makes the decisions for Smart Scale. He puts it out there. Who do we have to schmooze? I'm gonna be gone.
We have donuts this morning, as it's been.
I'm gonna be gone, but who do you have to schmooze to get anything further than like around, nothingness?
Right.
And I thought to myself, darn it, if I'd known that was somebody I could talk to, but he wouldn't have paid any attention to me. Because remember, he said, I drive that road every day, up in Fairfax. And he named the route number. And I'm sitting there thinking, on it, if I'd known it, it still might not have made any difference, but I could have done my pitch, about what we have to do and what we're gonna get done and whatever. But it's looking to me like it's a lot of that. We had to, I don't want to get into the fact that I was gonna cancel something and I get on the phone and I have to beat the drum. I'm canceling, then they offer me 43 months, $5.99. In other words, maybe we have to go like we had before, about 64. Do we have to throw a hissy fit to get attention?
I think Patricia had it rest. We call every road now a gap.
Okay.
And so that's part of it. We have to market this better. We have gaps in all of our localities, and if we,
I know it sounds petty,
I have a Wool
but-
Ridge gap I'm working on, and we have a Powhite gap, and so I mean, I think that's part of this. Yes, sir.
So
Mr. Long.
what is the policy board being asked?
Well, I mean, on our agenda today, we
Just
have.
Number of applications
we
is
have
what I
that.
picked up.
But there's lots of other changes, and I'm not sure, I could sit here and tell you that some of them may be favorable to Chesterfield, but that's not the hat I'm wearing today. We are all here as a region, and that means, large, middle, small jurisdictions. It's hard for me to see that any of these changes benefit anyone, to be perfectly blunt. So while the letter is written only on the applications, I'm almost in favor of this body coming out against all of the changes. I mean, personally, as a member of this body, I don't think I could support any of the changes. As a member of Chesterfield, yeah, there's a couple that I would say, well, let's see, we're going to, emphasize larger projects, but that doesn't help you all.
Well, I think my impression is the changes are going to force us to just, you have the issue of, Pat keeps noting that it's going to be hard to get win, but we're just talking about the application process right now, I think. And I think it's gonna make us, unfortunately, focus more on Goochland-centric projects.
Of course it does.
And
All
that's
of
not
us,
good
we're
for
all
the-
gonna go in like this.
I think that's maybe the point you're making. When I saw this and tried to dig into it, I'm like, this is pulling us away from regional focus.
All right.
And that's not, again, I'm with you, I'm here representing people in Goochland, but I sit on this body and I feel strongly, and I tell constituents that, what's good for the region is good for Goochland. Maybe we can look at one thing and say, oh, it's not, something else would be better for Goochland than this. But I mean, I think, we've been doing this regional thing for a while, and I think we're catching on that people don't care where they're what road, what county they're in, the city, and when they're driving down the road.
Mr. Hodges.
I was just gonna echo that comment, the letter from Virginia Association of NPOs, taking that step out of the district or the regions looking at high priority projects and making it a statewide competition. I don't know how we can compete with Northern Virginia.
We can't, because they're always gonna be able to put more money in.
Yes, and so it's getting away from the intent of the federal law that establishes NPOs for areas to be able to prioritize projects in their area and allocate funds, regionally, or at least with regional planning, as opposed to statewide allocation and competition where we might lose.
Mr. Peterson.
Well, I'm just sort of reading between the lines on this discussion. It sounds to me like somebody somewhere has not said, we don't care about the projects, we just don't want to review so many projects, period. And that's what I'm saying, it was 5, now it's 6 and 4, still 10. Somebody has, so it's really more, it sounds like this whole thing is more about administration than it is about getting transportation projects.
Right, and when we think about all of the work that our people do, and I'm looking at Barbara over here, we have lots of people in our localities who help put these projects together. They go through an enormous amount of work. And then to have the state continue to say, well, this is too much work for us. You know what, I'm so sorry. They dump on us on everything. Look what office is funded at 100%, constitutional office in your jurisdiction. What isn't sliding down the federal and state mountain to the locality that we're picking up the tab for? And I just think that there's got to be a voice of some point. We just say, we've had it. We are not going to go silently or gentle into that good night on these sorts of things. And this, I just, wearing this hat today, I can't support any of these proposed changes. And I would entertain, a recommendation from this group now that we have a quorum. Can I certify this quorum, by the way? Thank you. We have a certification of physical quorum. I would entertain a recommendation of this body to the full body, that this body reject all of the proposed changes and that we amend the letter that is in the packet here. That is, the letter's great, by the way. It was very gently and diplomatically worded, and so obviously I didn't write it, so thank you very much for that. But I think we could very easily simply say, you know, thanks, no thanks. These don't help our region. And I'd be willing to entertain that recommendation or motion from this body to do that if that is the will of this body. But I don't want to jump out in front here, but that's certainly my opinion.
What are our chances and who else is aligned with us? Because isn't this a statewide thing?
This is the CTB, is that right?
The CTV is going to hear this in December, so there's been a lot of work leading up to this.
This letter would go toward the CTB. Of course, you know, as I do, Mr. Lumpkins, as former chair of this body, this is the largest group we have, right, in terms of regional groups.
Sure.
And so.
Do other regional groups oppose, do we know if other regional groups oppose this?
There's lots of discussion around the state about these proposals being not good for
And
folks.
if I can jump in a little bit, I think from the staff perspective, we are not opposed to all of the changes. I think a lot of the changes staff has viewed as positive. I think the VAMPO letter that we included in your agenda packet covers the concerns that were broadly shared by MPOs throughout the state, which really is kind of three pieces. It was the number of applications being reduced, and I would be remiss if I didn't also point out that there is a distinct minority voice within the TAC and our body here that feels that the limits should be reduced. So I will throw that out there just because I want to make sure that is known. But the other pieces are the high priority projects, the eligibility criteria. It would eliminate bike ped projects and most transit projects. So the TPO would not be able to submit bike ped projects or transit projects, which I think is a major, those have been a lot of our successful applications in the past few cycles. So I think that's a huge issue for us, especially given that the fall line is largely unfunded. There's a large chunk that's still unfunded, and if the localities aren't able to submit as many applications, I think a natural successor would be that the MPO would be continuing to pick up that mantle.
So what's the purpose of that proposed change from the CTV's perspective? Because I noticed that too, and I sort of understand, I don't know, I'm just surmising why. What are they saying, why they're doing that?
So the intent is that the projects that would be covered under high priority are actually statewide significance. So the legislation says that they should be projects that are statewide or regionally significant on the regional networks or the corridors of statewide significance. So this is sort of refining that, but it's really moving it mostly toward capacity projects, interchange improvements, and then like rail or fixed skyways, so like BRT with a dedicated lane, which is a lot more limited. And it doesn't really account for the fact that MPOs plan for the region, and we actually have already decided what are our regional priorities and regional projects. So I think that's the disconnect, is it's not factoring in the MPOs and the fact that we already plan for the region and have decided what's regionally significant. So I think that's the challenge on that one.
Bike peds and trails are being taken out because it's basically moving volume. They're focused on, we need to put our money towards moving more volume of traffic across farther distances or something?
Correct. It's focused on those bigger, mostly highway-oriented projects, and as I mentioned, like the rail and the BRT. The other one that we had concern with was the land use factor change. We weren't opposed so much to the idea of turning land use into a multiplier, because I think that's a good change, because a lot of projects were scoring only on land use and then getting funded, which is really a factor of where they're located rather than what they're improving. The main challenge there is how you redistribute those points and what categories they go to. So the proposal is to go to safety and congestion, and that doesn't factor in, like, for example, our long-range plan. If you had followed how we weighted things for the region in the long-range plan, it would have gone more towards accessibility and not congestion. So it's just not factoring in how the MPOs have already looked at the region and said we should weight some of these same factors. And I think that was a shared concern across all the MPOs. So those are along with the application limits, those are the three things that the MPO staff is concerned with. And I think that's broadly shared with all of the peer organizations.
What about this, obtaining approvals prior to submission, right? We're gonna screen now anything that's not 100% ready for submission. Doesn't that change disproportionately affect our smaller jurisdictions?
I think it does potentially impact the smaller localities. I think there's a partnership with VDOT to get those projects ready. So I think that's something we've been encouraging for the MPO's applications as well, as work with the district to get your projects ready to submit to us, so we don't have to try and figure out what your estimate actually is after the fact and all of those details. So it's the same approach that we're taking at the MPO. So I think we can definitely understand why they're going that way, and that's why we're not concerned as much on that front. Again, putting on the MPO hat, we are already submitting applications. When we do the applications that are in the smaller localities, MPO staff takes those on. So we are not requiring those localities to do it. Whereas when the larger localities have a project that's coming through us, we let you guys work on them. So it's the trade-off. We are providing that support to make sure we're still getting those applications in.
If I could ask you a question. You indicated that staff identified, if you just give us some bullet points, some things you thought were positive changes. Tell us what those are.
Sure. So the economic development changes, what the proposal is, so the current approach, basically staff from the locality has to identify every zoning and comp plan amendment, everything that's in the vicinity, and you have to map all of these out. So it's extremely time intensive. And the proposed move would go toward a statewide database of from VEDP of known economic development sites. So it's really taking a lot of the work off of locality staff and focusing on those larger industries and those larger development sites that are known to be positive for the state. So I think that's a positive. It takes a lot of the work away from what we've had to do. The change in congestion, I think, is a very positive for our region. So if we're growing, congestion 10 years out is going to be worse than congestion today. So by looking at the future, and we know there's something planned, it's actually proactive planning rather than just responding to current issues. So I think one of the key projects that they highlighted in the CTB's presentations was the Project Rocky and the Ashland Road DDI. That project scored very poorly because it was looking at current congestion levels, which there's nothing there. But if you're building a giant economic development opportunity there, there's going to be traffic in the future. So this is actually getting ahead of it and planning rather than just reacting to issues as they come up down. So those are positive changes. I think the general changes.
Can I just ask something on that? So if you're a locality that has a road that's currently congested that you have a project in mind for, couldn't that be weighed just as equally as a project that's looking out in the future to eliminate future congestion? In other words, why impose on the locality over top of the locality its own statewide judgment about how a locality should be prioritizing one versus the other? I mean, you're asking district reps. We're always trying to balance things out, even amongst the locality, about what to do and where to do it and what to put funding on. And it's almost substituting the locality's judgment over what should be a priority. And in some cases, maybe that short-term congestion is more important. Again, why have this in here?
So, I mean, I think really a lot of what this comes down to is this is federal money mixed in. The federal government has certain performance issues that we're looking at. So this is a lot of, and this is what OIP does, is they look at performance targets, they set performance measures, they assess, they evaluate. So this is a very data-driven process, driven in large part by the federal requirements in funding. So this is responding to those requirements. I think there's, whether we use current congestion or future congestion, that's the area that's up for debate. But I think we do have to look at it as a factor, and there's got to be some level of statewide. I think the other piece of it is, there's not enough funding for every project. So there has to be some methodology that looks at each of those factors and prioritizes.
And I was just going to respond to your question. It's not the locality deciding what's best, it's the region deciding. And we've gone to all this trouble of setting up criteria and prioritizing between jurisdictions, and that's being taken away, it appears.
Right, and that's right.
So
That's a
those
better
were
way
the
to say
two
it.
positives. Were there other positives?
Were there any positives?
Well, this is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
From the staff
I'm still waiting to hear them, yes.
Still waiting for the positive.
Yeah, we're,
I'm still waiting, I'm sorry.
Sure, so I think the step 2 elimination from the high priority projects is actually going to be beneficial for this region. Again, I said this earlier, but instead of some of the money staying in like the Bristol district just because it's within that district and they go through the scoring, if you actually look at the breakdown over the past few rounds, our projects that weren't getting funded scored better than those projects in some of the more rural districts. And I think making it a statewide program, we'd actually wind up with more projects moving into the Richmond area because it's truly a statewide competition rather than more than half of the money being tied up at the district level and then whatever's left going to the statewide competition. So in most of the previous rounds, we've seen 1 or 2 projects come through that actual statewide competition portion of it, whereas this would move all of that funding, and I think we would do much better. When staff looked at it earlier, just looking at the step 2 process, we would have had additional projects from the MPO and additional projects from some of our localities that would have been eligible and could have qualified based on that change. So I think it would be beneficial for us as a region as a whole.
so, but that takes money away from the districts.
Well,
to accomplish that.
no, what it does is it instead of tying it up at the different regions of the Commonwealth, so there's still the district pot, that stays the same. It's just in the statewide pot, we're not tying part of it to the regions. We're saying this is truly statewide. And I think, again, because we are a growing urbanized area, we have a lot more activity, a lot more issues that would be addressed.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that's a
Mile
proposed
for real.
change, that is a proposed change that you're just talking about, is taking some money that was at the high priority statewide, that still has some district designation, removing that district designation?
Correct. So
And
basically,
what kind of are we talking, like a large chunk of it, or?
so there's not a defined number. Basically, the way that it worked was they would go down the list of your projects that had been approved in the district grant, and then certain applicants aren't eligible for district grant funding, so the MPO, the PDC, and GRTC. So any of those applications that otherwise would have been funded if they had been in the other pot would get money first. And then we'd move to the state, and they did that in every district. And then we'd move to the statewide program with whatever's left. And instead, what they'll do is just rank all the projects that are still eligible for the high priority pot and work their way down the list with the full pot of money. So it basically it replicates the district process, but just at a statewide level for only those projects that are eligible. So.
All right, maybe you got one.
Okay.
When, just,
Ms. O'Bannon?
well,
We got a little time.
The Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting, is that just gonna be the discussion? And
Yes.
if it is, there needs to be a coordinated effort with any other people that might be involved in a particular project we've got? I mean, how should we approach it?
So that's kind of the intent of this letter is our first, as a region, speaking of what issues we've identified with proposed changes. Again, as I've noted, there isn't a consensus on the application limit at the TAC level, not unanimous consensus, but there was general agreement that is of concern. We didn't have any general agreement on anything else. We kind of heard different opinions on everything else. So that was really what we tried to focus on and just keep it narrowly tailored to the application limits. And then I think there's opportunity to speak at the CTB meeting. Each of the localities can send letters if you haven't already. So there is the ability for us to continue coordinating and adding more input on this issue. I think the CTB doesn't have a November meeting, so December is their next meeting as far as I'm aware, and that's when they are planning, at least tentatively, to make a decision on all of these changes. So anything we can do between now and then to help change the course on that is definitely advisable.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
I'm gonna move that we recommend to the full TPO that we have concerns that this has not been these changes have not been properly vetted. With the only place that we feel comfortable with is help me say it, Miles, the last one we talked about, moving, adding all that to statewide instead of the regional.
That number 2 on page 29 of your regular agenda in the next meeting.
Calculate, can you just?
And what about congestion? Is there any feeling on that as well?
From our discussion here, I still feel like that hadn't been properly vetted either.
That was a motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. I'll take all in favor. Any other discussion?
And the motion is to take to the policy board here in a few minutes,
A recommendation.
a recommendation.
To disagree with all the changes except
To-
for item
Number
number
two.
2.
You don't want the one about economic development?
I'm not saying that, I'm saying it's not been properly vetted at this point.
Okay.
It's too many people and going in too many different directions for me to be comfortable.
And I think that goes to the Vampos, I'm reading Vampos letter a little more closely now, and here we are, November, and this is a December CTV meeting. And right here, they say, our first concern regards the limited engagement with MPOs in the development of the proposed policy changes. And that seems either it's our fault or somebody's fault, I don't know whose fault it is, but here we are in November with all this stuff coming at us for a December meeting. And we're having this discussion, just trying to
Well-
sort that. So how are we going to put something together that's effective?
And to your point, Mr. Lunkins, we have, a brand new CTV member and the Richmond, Henrico and Chesterfield did have a meeting with him yesterday for the first time, just to introduce ourselves and talk about at least the application limit at Bon Air Library. This happened yesterday, and I did let him know that he would be hearing from the TPO after today's meeting in some fashion or another, knowing that letter that's currently drafted, something would go to him. But he seems eager to learn. He also seems to have a very fair viewpoint, wants to make sure that our smaller jurisdictions are being treated just as our larger jurisdictions are. So he expressed appreciation for bringing up everyone in the region, and that he was going to try to forge a balanced approach, but that he's learning all of this and doesn't have the history of the last, 5-6 years of this. So I want to encourage everyone to reach out directly to him and have a conversation with him personally, because I think that's how he's going to hear from us. In addition to this body, which we can send a letter that says we have concerns. I think we could say to Mr. Peterson's motion, I think we could say maybe uniformly, we don't support the application limit. We have concerns about everything but number 2, if that's a friendly amendment to go toward the body.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's correct, because I don't think we want to take a adversarial position here. We want to say that we don't think that this is ready. These things need to be looked at a little bit further, and if we have to wait until the next time to make these changes and get everybody's input, so be it. But to sit here and jump the gun, do these hoops this fast without thoroughly investigating, looking at these things I don't think it was a wise move.
I agree.
And I think we could word that in a positive way.
Well, I guess there's always that entanglement, but my understanding is these are not directives from the federal government under any circumstance.
No, so this update, basically when the last round of Smart Scale ended, every time the CTV and OEP review the process and see what worked well, what didn't, and then they propose updates. So this has been part of that cycle. So it's every 2 years we go through this, and this is just the latest set of proposed changes based on the current CTV and the OEP review.
Perhaps we could also recommend that they not go through this process for a couple of cycles, so that we actually have a baseline to review before they move the goalposts again.
Is it really broke?
I like that. Can you put that in the letter?
I'd be happy to put that in the letter.
Because that, I think you're absolutely right on that. Keep switching.
You cannot evaluate anything after one cycle. It's like when we go through, anyway, I don't need to go in there, but all right. So what I'm hearing, and I'm gonna restate this motion, but this motion is to recommend that the body oppose the application limits, that the body expresses concerns about every other item, but supports item number 2, as outlined in pages 28 through 30 on the main agenda. Is that, and to formulate the letter to, follow that recommendation? Is
In a
that
positive way.
in a positive, delightful, diplomatic way? So somebody else, who's gonna write that? Somebody. Miles, thank you.
I accept the friendly amendment.
Yeah, I accept it as well.
All right, very good. All in favor? Aye. All right, we're gonna stand in, I'm just gonna adjourn this executive meeting right now, because we got 5 minutes, and we've talked about what we really need to talk about here.
Well, you can actually run through this really quick.
You think?
Yeah.
Is there, y'all wanna,
The minutes and
do need, I guess we do need to do that, don't
Time to confirm member participation. Participation.
we? They're not, there's nobody on.
Amendments to meeting agenda.
All right, let's see, amendment, is there amendments? There's no
No,
amendments. All right.
That's
Are there any amendments to the meeting agenda? Hearing and seeing none, I need a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is everyone familiar with the meeting minutes on page 3, and is there a motion?
So moved. Adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I was not present, so I.
Secretary's report, I'm gonna consider that having been given, unless you have something really high on the list you wanna talk about.
I did want to ask Martha to come up really quickly
Oh.
to give the update on
Oh,
TPO staffing.
sure.
We have advertised an MPO administrator position, received some good quality applications, have completed the first round of interviews, have second round of interviews scheduled for mid-November. Joe Vidunas, Chair of TAC, has agreed to participate, and pending Chairman Winslow's schedule, he will also be in attendance. And so I am hopeful that by the December Policy Board meeting, we will be able to make an announcement of our new MPO administrator.
And that meeting is December 7th, correct?
Yes, that sounds correct.
When is the CTB meeting in December?
December 1st.
The 1st. All right. So we'll have a report back from the 5th? 5th, all right. So we'll have a quick report back from that as well. All right, very good. Thank you, Martha, and thank you, Miles.
And I just wanted to say kudos and thank you to Miles for
He
filling
stepped
this
in.
interim role. And he will still be very much a fixture with the policy board. We've done a little bit of a restructure with the positions. And so the MPO administrator and Miles will be working hand in glove and making sure that the work is happening for transportation in the region. So thank you.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you. And we're adjourned. We have 5 minutes.